Now, if you can believe it, next week, our Queen of Hearts, Princess Diana, would have been celebrating her milestone 60th birthday. Tragically dying at just 36 years of age, Diana left behind her two boys, William and Harry. Next week, the two will reunite to celebrate their late mum's life and unveil a memorial statue in one of Diana's favourite places, the sunken gardens of Kensington Palace. We're joined now by a man who knew Diana very well and a man who she trusted, royal biographer Andrew Morton. Good morning to you, Andrew.
Good morning. I just stopped dad dancing there, so...
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, Linda, you were just saying, weren't you? You think forward to her 60th birthday.
Yeah. I just think, Andrew, what do you think she'd look like now?
Well, I think she wouldn't have changed an awful lot because she kept herself very fit. She worked out most days, went swimming in the pool at Buckingham Palace, had a pretty strict diet, lots of veg, jacket potatoes and caviar was her favourite, and the odd glass of bubbly. So, you know, I'm sure that possibly Dr. Botox may have been called in from time to time, but that's about it.
Oh, I like to think she wouldn't have needed Botox. She was gorgeous. But also, she's got lovely grandchildren now that she never got to meet. What sort of nan do you think she would have been? I mean, she was a great mum, and I'm sure she would have been a great nan.
She would have been a a glamorous granny, and I'm sure that she would have been fighting for weekends away for George, Charlotte and Louis with Carol Middleton. She wouldn't let her have all the fun.
Andrew, sorry.
And another thing, she was thinking when she was alive of going to live in either Martha's Vineyard on the east coast of America or Malibu on the west coast. And I'm sure that once she had grandchildren, she'd have been drawn right back to Britain and bought something, you know, out in the sticks.
Although, of course, as we know, two of her grandchildren are now living in America. And, of course, there's been much talk with the unveiling of the statue. Everything is focused on this sort of seeming feud between William and Harry. Every time I read about it, my overriding sentiment is how upset their mother would have been by that if she was alive. How do you think she would have handled it?
Well, no question, Jane. I mean, she said to me quite clearly on several occasions that she saw Harry as the wingman for William in what would be ultimately a very solitary and sombre and solemn job as the future king. So she would have been very upset at the way that these two have split apart. Knowing their personalities intimately, as a mother would do, she'd be working out, perhaps as well with Prince Charles by her side, a way of reconciling them, because it doesn't really help the monarchy, it doesn't help the family as individuals for this feud to continue.
How do you remember her, Andrew? What kind of person? How do you remember her? Well,
I mean, she had a great connectivity. She could connect with people. But I always used to remember the sense of humour. She, you know, even when I was asking her questions about her suicide attempts or her desperate cries for help, she used to say, "Oh, well, Andrew's pretty well written my obituary, hasn't he?" I mean, she never really took herself too seriously, and she always had a very light touch about her. And it's something that, because her life was kind of tinged by tragedy and ended in tragedy, you tend to forget that.
I wanted to ask you actually about that tragedy, because obviously, you know, it is just one of those things where everyone remembers where they were when they heard the news. Where were you? And I mean, how did it make you feel?
Well, I was in Edinburgh at the Arts Festival, and I caught the first plane I could back down to London. And I remember very well a Frenchman who obviously recognised me from TV handed me a note, and he said, "I'd like to apologise on behalf of the whole of France," meaning that at that time, everybody thought that the paparazzi had kind of surrounded her car like Red Indians round a stagecoach in the Westerns, whereas it took a long time for it to emerge that it was a drunk driver, high on drugs, driving too fast in a built-up area.
You know, Andrew, there's been so many speculations in regards to conspiracies and all kind of, you know, things spoken around the tragic death of Princess Diana. What do you make of some of these stories or the things that have been put forward in this tragic event?
Well, there's absolutely no question that Diana was conspired against. No question at all. I mean, the valets, the bodyguards, the courtiers, the press officers, all kept her or shielded her from knowledge about Prince Charles and his relationship with another man's wife, Camilla Parker Bowles. And so for the first 10, 12 years of her adult life, everybody was living in a land of make-believe. With regards to the actual crash, if she'd been wearing a seatbelt, she'd be with us today. And that, I'm afraid, is the immutable truth.
What about the situation that sort of put her in Paris on that night? Because a lot of blame has been laid at the door of Martin Bashir, because, of course, she had given up her security detail, her royal protection, because she feared that they were snooping on her. And actually, that wasn't true. Where do you feel now that what do you feel Martin Bashir's position is in all of that?
Well, I mean, Martin didn't drive her to her death. What he did do was leapfrog over a whole queue of interviewers, Oprah Winfrey, Barbara Walters, Clive James, David Frost and others. And, you know, as far as Bashir was concerned, yes, he scared her half to death with his stories about MI5. But I mean, she would have given an interview to somebody. And in fact, ITV, I was part of a little ITV consortium who we did some filming of her. We were going to do a documentary about her humanitarian mission, and the producer went to see her at Kensington Palace to outline the storylines a bit further. And when she walked into the room, he was consumed by a fit of sneezing, and it was hay fever, and he couldn't get a word out. And after about 5 minutes of this, she gently ushered him out, and that was the end of the ITV bid. So, you know, this is kind of a sliding doors fragment of history. If he'd not been sneezing, maybe ITV would have got the interview of the century.
You know, Andrew, I definitely would want to ask you about, you know, there's been so much headlines regards to Harry and Meghan and just almost the constant, you know, storylines regards to them, which sometimes are very negative. How do you think, you know, Princess Diana would take to all of these stories and things that are being told in the newspapers?
Well, I mean, there's endless stories about Meghan. I mean, Diana would see a fellow spirit, because after just a few months inside the royal family herself, Diana, who was not biracial, was not divorced, was not American, but was part of the aristocracy, she was being called a fiend and a monster by newspapers, and she was being accused of really ruling the roost at Kensington Palace, when at that time she was just trying to survive. Well, fast forward to Meghan's years, or a couple of years that she spent inside the royal family, and she was struggling with depression, suicidal thoughts, just like Diana. So there's a remarkable symmetry here in Diana's early life inside the royal family and Meghan. So I'm sure she would have felt a real commonality of feeling.
Andrew, very, very quickly, because we're running out of time, I just want you to just quickly tell us the Donald Trump story, and just also how you think she might have ended up romantically with who?
Well, I spoke to Donald Trump's aide-de-camp in Mar-a-Lago, who asked me, could I use my influence to get Paul Burrell to come and work for him? And it was clear that Donald fancied Diana, and he sent her bunches of flowers. But what he didn't know was that she was dating another billionaire, a guy called Teddy Forstmann, and she wanted him to run for president because she quite fancied the idea of being First Lady. And there's no question in my mind that she would have remarried. She was looking for love, and she used to say to me when the astrologers and clairvoyants had picked the guy, "Come on over. I'm ready and waiting."
Well, sadly, not to be. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. Really interesting stuff. You could talk about that for a long, long time. Andrew Morton there. I mean, it's next Thursday, I think, would have been her 60th birthday.
Yeah.